think it is such an important letter. There could be those that would pay a great deal more than that.
Letters of this quality from C.S. Lewis are extremely rare.
You're joking.
One of the most enduring images that almost any schoolchild will remember is the scene of Nelson dying on HMS Victory, surrounded by his officers and men, and particularly Thomas Hardy. And this really is the most moving letter written by Hardy from HMS Victory. And in it he states, "We have, on the 21st, just obtained a most glorious victory over the combined fleets, but it has cost the country a life that no money can replace, and for whose death I shall forever mourn." And he goes on to describe the very moving scene and how he then led the fleet to victory, and he even states the number killed and the losses on their side and so on. And finishing up here, yours affectionately, T.M. Hardy, Thomas Masterman Hardy. It was written a week after the battle, as Victory lay off Cadiz on October the 27th, 1805. And of course, one of the reasons it was written a week later was that they suffered terrible, terrible gales between the Victory and when they finally landed in Gibraltar. It appears to be written to a Mr. Mansfield. I must say, I don't know who Mr. Mansfield is, but it was written to Dorchester. Now, Hardy came from near Dorchester. He came from a place called Portisham. So I think with a little bit of research, we should be able to find out who Mansfield was. He was clearly a personal friend of Hardy's, because he was writing this moving letter to his friend. Now, tell me, how on earth did you come by this wonderful thing?
I bought it at an antique auction in Yorkshire.
Really? And how long ago did you buy it?
97.
Gosh, very recent. So what was the pre-sale estimate?
60 to 100.
60 to 100 pounds?
I think that was what it was.
Gosh.
When I saw it at the viewing and my daughter read it, and she was so moved by it that I thought I must buy it for her.
Yeah. Did you have to pay a lot more for it?
800.
Crikey, that's a bit of a change from the estimates. So were you...
I was very moved.
Were you, yes, very moved. Were you prodding her to keep going, or were you holding her hand to tell her to stop?
No, I was hanging on, hoping she wouldn't give up.
Right, right. Well, it is absolutely wonderful, and it's such a moving account. It's very personal, and I think one of the important things about any letter like this is that you need all those personal touches to make it to make it valuable. Yeah. You've got the water stain. One sort of almost imagines perhaps it was written, you know, it got stained as a result of the storm. You know, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but it seems rather nice to imagine that. It's got his seal on it. And I do think that your £800 investment was a very shrewd buy. I think today you probably would get £2,000 to £3,000 for it, and possibly more. And I think it is such an important letter. There could be those that would pay a great deal more than that. So a jolly useful little buy.
Right, first things first. Rusty paper clips and old paper don't go together. There you are, I'm going to give you that back.
Sorry.
They shouldn't be seen together. So I got here a draft for a letter. It is signed AR on the bottom here. And as I look here, I see Dear Mr. Rook. Now, is this Mr. Rook?
It certainly is, yes.
And who is Mr. Rook?
Well, he was at Oxford, and C.S. Lewis was one of his tutors. But he was a poet. He was a war poet and published.
Yes, yes.
But actually, that wasn't his livelihood. He was a wine merchant, in fact.
Well, yes, I mean, that's a poet and a wine merchant. What could be better? And here we are, a most extraordinary letter from C.S. Lewis. All in his hand, and he often had his letters typed, or his letters were typed, yes, or written by his brother, but this is entirely in his hand. An extraordinary letter, a very interesting letter, because it sets out lots of points of philosophy, about poetry, all sorts of things. And here we are, 1, 2, 3.5 pages, and he signs it here at the bottom. Do not feel under any obligation to answer this out of courtesy. On the other hand, do not hesitate to continue the discussion if you wish. I always have time for your sort of letter. Yours, C.S. Lewis. So he gives him tremendous amount of praise there. I mean, that's quite incredible, isn't it, really?
Yes.
And here, the author of the Narnia books is here again. Dear Mr. Rook, wonderful letters, absolutely tremendous, full of little diagrams and all sorts of things. But this one, instead of 3.5 pages, runs to 5. Abandon hope about oysters. I've been trying to learn to like them for 39 years, no success. Yours, C.S. Lewis. Absolutely fantastic. Then you also bring in not so exciting perhaps, but nevertheless somebody who is a member of the Inklings.
Oh, that was the name, was it?
Yes, they were a group of literary, like-minded professors. They used to meet at the Eagle and Child, which they, in Oxford,
Yes.
in St Giles, which they called the Bird and Baby, I mean, for whatever reasons.
Really? Because we've actually got a silver cigarette box at home where they've signed inside.
This is too much. Why didn't you bring it in?
Well, it's all so faded, I didn't think you'd be particularly interested.
You've rubbed it too hard. Anyway, a copy of The Hobbit. Now, it's not a first edition of The Hobbit.
No.
It doesn't have a dust wrapper, it's rather dirty, so I'm not particularly going to get excited about it. A second impression. But inside, you have this postcard from Tolkien,
Yes.
The Lord of the Rings, and the person who wrote this particular book. But on the back here, just look at this lovely, lovely script, and he signs it J.R.R. and a wonderful flourish T.
Yes,
There.
it's a lovely signature, isn't it?
And if you look at this, because he did all the illustrations
Yes,
for
so
The
I-
Hobbit,
yes,
if
I
you
hadn't
look at this
realised.
map here, you can see the similarity
Yes.
between the scripts.
I noticed
here.
that today for the first time.
And particularly the one at the back here, which I think is absolutely wonderful, which has got more colour in it. But they're so glorious. I mean, this is a completely different age. I mean, who would think of doing that? You'd get on your mobile, wouldn't you? And you'd just ring it in, and it would all be lost. But here it is. Now, the unusual thing, let me tell you, about correspondence among professors in university colleges is that they all made provision, or mostly made provision, for their letters to be received into one of the big university libraries or something like that. So I have to say that a postcard from Tolkien is quite rare. Letters of this quality from C.S. Lewis are extremely rare because they nearly always ended up in universities. Now, tell me, do you have any idea what sort of value one would put on a 5-page letter of C.S. Lewis?
No.
A 3-page letter?
I only put on a family value, that it was
Of
lovely
C.S.
to have
Lewis.
something from somebody famous who'd written to somebody in the family. I hadn't thought of it as a monetary value at all.
Well, they do have a monetary value. This charming little Tolkien item would sell for £500. Yes, £500, just that. Now, if it said something about The Hobbit, or if it had said something about The Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
we'd be talking about probably double that.
Good Lord.
He's very desirable. C.S. Lewis, Shadowlands and all the
Quite.
stuff that has come out recently
Quite.
about him and all that
Quite.
sort of thing, is a very interesting and fascinating person. And so a letter like this, where he goes into a lot of detail about his scholarly work and his scholarly ideas, would be very valuable. So a 3-page letter would be worth somewhere in the region of £1,500. But a 5-page letter, I have to say, is worth £2,500.
Good Lord.
I can't help feeling you've got a whole hoard of things back at home that you should
I'm
have
going to
brought
go
in.
home and look in much more detail.
Thank you for bringing them in.
Thank you very, very much.
We seem to have almost a full house here of all the royal residences. Curiously, locally, we don't have Sandringham, but how did you come by this collection?
It was handed down to my step-grandfather by the chief librarian of Windsor Castle.
And was he Mr. Woodward?
Yeah, that's correct. Mr.
Right.
Woodward was appointed there in 1860, and the scrapbook and the invitations were handed down by him, a member of his family, through down to my family.
Right. He seems to have been invited to all the great events too, so he obviously had quite a nice life. It's a wonderful picture of life in Victorian England, isn't it, with these wonderfully grand invitations. But although those are very interesting, really the main thing is this fantastic album here. And perhaps it's worth starting right almost at the beginning. This is full of absolutely riveting things, isn't it?
It is.
And while he was at Windsor Castle, he obviously was in the habit of receiving letters and writing letters on behalf of the Queen and the other members of the royal family. And rather than chucking them away like we do today, he obviously kept them, and he kept them nicely mounted in this album. And I think one of the nicest things right at the beginning are these 2 scribbled little notes from Queen Victoria to him in pencil, just asking him to make sure that he could, it says, "Dear Mr. Woodward, send over those drawings," and then it's rather difficult to read which drawings, which is rather maddening, isn't it? But you can imagine her rather imperiously saying, "Send over those drawings, Woodward." And here it is, November the 17th, 1864. On this occasion, she's asking for a volume of somebody's English history. You know, it conjures up a wonderful picture of Queen Victoria sitting in her ivory tower, sending for Woodward and his and all his books. He was obviously clearly a friend of the royal family, because here you've got this absolutely delightful sketch where it says here, Princess Louise and Miss Bower. In the distance, B.B. Woodward and Mr. Roland. So this is actually Woodward in one of the drawings.
Yes, it is.
Their album is just full of the most extraordinary things, and you know, it would take weeks to go through it all. You've got here a cheque signed by the Duke of Wellington. Here you've got a letter from John Ruskin, you know, the great man of letters and the arbiter of taste in Victorian times about art. Sadly, the content of the letters isn't wildly exciting. It would be nice if he was making groundbreaking comments, but nevertheless, it's still very interesting.
I suppose there's a limit to what you can say to a librarian, though, isn't there?
Well, I suspect that's right, and I think it's a very good comment. I think, you know, the relationship with these people was a professional relationship rather than an intimate relationship. In other words, he wasn't writing as a friend to dear Woodward. He was writing, you're quite right, probably more instructive or demanding, rather like Queen Victoria's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is extremely rare. Florence Nightingale. You know, you just don't get Nightingale autographs like this. And so it goes on. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely wonderful. And once again, there's another of the great Victorian figures, Darwin. Fantastic. And, you know, as I say, it would take weeks to go through them all, but it's a real treat to see them. It's very difficult until one has a chance to go right through the whole lot to put a value on it. And at the end of the day, I suspect, you know, because they're clipped out and pasted in, you know, the value of some of the letters has diminished a bit. But I can imagine, with a bit of research, it would be worth somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 for the collection. The drawing alone is worth probably 700 or 800. So, you know, jolly nice thing to have.
This is such a good Beatrix Potter letter that I feel I have to read it all the way through. Here it is, to Bolton Gardens. Well, Bolton Gardens now is a children's playground, which I think is a rather nice thing. It starts, My dear Marjorie, Miss Woodward sent me such a nice little letter which you had written for me, and I was so much pleased to hear about your little white bunnies. My bunnies are always brown, but I had once had a clear white rat with pink eyes, and I don't know if he wrote letters, but I think if he did, he would look like this. And there's this wonderful little picture of the little rat, and she's actually put in little pink eyes there, which I think is tremendous. And then it goes on. He was always very fond of quill pens, and once he stole a stick of sealing wax and 2 matches, and another time he put his nose into the ink bottle by mistake. So I think he must have wanted to write to you. He was very fat and lazy and spent most of his time in bed, and here it is, this wonderful pink rat again, in bed. When he was awake, he was never out of mischief, but he was so very good-tempered. I really could not scold him, not even when he ate 2 fingers off a new pair of gloves. His name was Sammy. He used to come running after me when I called him, just like a little dog. I was very sorry when he died. I've got a rabbit and a squirrel now. I bought 2 squirrels, but the one I called Nutkin, and here is a picture of Nutkin, who was much the handsomest, was so very savage I was obliged to take him back to the shop. So I only have one now called Twinkleberry. He's getting quite tame. I made a little sleeping box for him. My little bunny is sitting on the table licking my hand all the time. There's the sleeping box for the squirrel. I am writing so that I can hardly hold the pen. So good night, and you and Keith shall have another book next Christmas from yours affectionately, Beatrix Potter. And there's kisses being sent by the rabbit and the little squirrel, the squirrel Twinkleberry. Well, that's lovely. Now tell me about it. Who is it written to?
It's written to my mother.
How did you know Beatrix Potter?
My grandmother was an artist, and she had met Beatrix Potter through Miss Woodward, who was an illustrator of children's books.
Right. Well, this is written in 1903, and Beatrix Potter had really only just started on her fame, I suppose. 1902 was the date of Peter Rabbit. 1903 was Squirrel Nutkin, I think. So really, this is quite early on, and she was very generous with her time. In fact, all through her life, I think she was very generous with her time in writing to people. So this is an absolute corker of a letter. I can't say better than that. It really is an absolutely amazing letter. I have not seen one so good for a very long time, even with its envelope, which, although not valuable, is rather nice to have with it. She's become very desirable and very valuable these days. Do you have a sort of an idea?
I haven't a clue.
A ballpark where she is?
Not a
Well,
clue.
10 or 15 years ago, I'd have said that a letter like this, delightfully illustrated, will be worth somewhere in the region of £200 or £300. But nowadays, I'm afraid, so much is the taste for Beatrix Potter that a letter like this would fetch somewhere between £20,000 and £25,000 today.
You're joking.
I'm glad you're surprised. Henry Moore was the most original artist of the 20th century. In fact, not since Rodin in the 19th century, I think, had anybody been quite so original as him. You could imagine my surprise to see such an enormous collection of letters from this incredibly great artist, and quite a few of them illustrated, like this one, to Dearest Evelyn. Now, who is Dearest Evelyn?
She's my mother.
She's your mother. And these are all written, I mean, Dearest Evelyn, I can't help just reading a few comments here, seem to be incredibly, incredibly intimate and very, very important. Did they have a very close relationship?
I think that she rather hoped that it would lead to something more than it perhaps did.
Marriage or something like that?
I think possibly, yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I think that he left her a very nice legacy with these wonderful illustrated letters. This is quite an incredible collection. I mean, this one here to Dearest Evelyn with this lovely, I suppose in Picasso terms, you'd say blue period. And this one here too, which is just absolutely charming, this nude under the mistletoe, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And then these letters go on for pages and pages and pages. But however, I think the one that I think is most extraordinary is this letter here, which is Dearest Evelyn, and then with this wonderful, absolutely incredible doodle, which is so like Moore, it's just incredible. Here is a picture of him in the centre here. This is your letter. He's reading her letter. And then a speech bubble over here. Just an attempt which has failed, which I think is absolutely wonderful. I'm going to bed. I'm tired. I mark myself beforehand. Good night, Evelyn.
I like it where he rates it 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. I think that's right. So, having known Moore, did you have any other paintings or pictures?
My mother had a portrait of herself by him, which I can remember as a child, but we lived in a house whose garden went down to the Thames at Kew, and twice we were flooded. The cellar was full to about 8 foot, and it was submerged again, and I can remember having that the insurers paid £500 for it.
They paid you £500 for an oil portrait of your mother
I think it
Henry
might have been
Moore.
a drawing, I can't remember it, or a black and white sketch.
What a pity.
Yes,
but I mean, this is incredible. You've got a collection here of what, 30 odd love
about
letters?
31, yeah.
Well, love letters, very intimate letters anyway, shall we say. Many with lovely drawings in. I mean, this is just so typical of Henry Moore. It's breathtaking. And I've seen very few Henry Moore letters come onto the market. Still less have I seen ones with drawings in them. But I mean, a drawing by Henry Moore of your mother or somebody like that would probably make the best part of £100,000 on the market today.
They got 500 for it, yeah.
500. Whereas a drawing, a small drawing on this scale, of this size, I think would make today the best part of, £10,000. And, you know, these other drawings here, the sort of blue period ones, these are sort of certainly worth a few £1,000s each. So this collection, this magnificent collection of Henry Moore, would, I suppose, be worth somewhere in the region of about £50,000.
Good heavens. Well, I just brought them along because I thought somebody might like to read them if there was a biographer. And
You're absolutely right. I think the chances are that no biographer has actually had a chance to read these at all.